VMware View is VMware's desktop virtualization solution. That's the logo for it right over there, by the way, the new logo. And what it is a desktop virtualization solution for large enterprises. Its sweet spot is really the largest of the enterprises out there. It does run on top of VMware vSphere. It requires VMware vSphere to be the hypervisor underneath. It's integrated with VMware ThinApp for application virtualization as well. In fact, ThinApp is included with VMware View. The end users connecting to their virtual desktops very likely would connect using thin client devices, and those thin client devices with VMware View would most likely be using VMware's PC over IP protocol. They could use Microsoft's RDP protocol, but VMware View comes with PC over IP, and that's what VMware recommends. Of course, those end users could also be connecting from, let's say, Mac systems or Windows desktops using the VMware View client. They could even connect from Android or iPad mobile devices to access their virtualized desktops. VMware View 5 offers what they call persona management, which actually separates user data from applications and operating system data. So you've got actually three different pieces that typically make up a desktop. The user data, that could be your personal files. It could also be the configurations for the applications you use, or maybe even your desktop background. That data is separate from the applications that would be running on that virtual desktop, and then that's separate from the operating system that runs on the virtual desktop. This way, all these things are independent, so that you can upgrade the applications without affecting the user data or the operating system. You could also upgrade the operating system without affecting the applications and user data. This is a whole new way to think about managing end-user devices. I mean, traditionally, you have the operating system upgrades that need to be done that could affect the applications, and then you have application upgrades that could conflict with the operating system or the user data settings. You run the risk of losing the user data, so you use Windows roaming profiles, let's say, and all these things are very intertwined, and it gets very ugly and very messy. This persona management is a great new feature to make end-user desktop administration easier. Another new feature in VMware View 5 is what they call local mode, which means you can actually take your virtual desktop offline or your virtual machine offline. So let's say that you're going on a business trip in an airplane. You could bring a laptop with a local version of your virtual desktop. You could make changes. You could use that virtual machine. When you get back to the office, you resync or you upload that virtual machine's changes back to the vSphere virtual machine running in the infrastructure, and now you're using desktop virtualization in an offline mode. It's a very cool feature because traditionally you couldn't use virtual machines offline. And then finally, one of the best features of VMware View is called linked clones. With linked clones, let's say that you have 100 end users that are going to be using desktop virtualization. You can create one virtual machine, and let's say you call it the master virtual machine. And then every one of those end users can get their own virtual machine, but it's all tied back to that master virtual machine disk file. And then the changes are the only thing taking up space on the disk for each of the 100 virtual machines, because all those virtual machines are based on that one master virtual machine disk file. So really it's only the changes from the master that actually take up space on your storage area network. And you can picture how this would be a tremendous benefit when it comes to saving disk space the more users that you have, because if you have 1,000 users or 5,000 users, picture the difference in the space utilization for just one virtual machine versus 1,000 or 5,000 virtual machines, all taking up space in your storage infrastructure. So those are just some of the features of VMware View. Now let's move on and look at a graphic here that represents how VMware View works. On the left-hand side, you've got what they call user experience. So you've got various options of client devices that could be used to access the virtual desktop in the middle of the graphic here. You've got thin clients, you've got desktop computers, laptop computers, and even mobile devices or web browsers. All those users, no matter what device they're using, can access their desktop virtual machine. They should get very good performance because the PC over IP protocol is what's being used to transmit the changes to the screen and the keyboard and mouse input back to the virtual machine. the IT administrator and the company is going to gain benefits related to desktops, such as disaster recovery, greater security, availability, and backup. And that's because all these desktops are now hardware independent and they're running as virtual machines in the company data center. So those virtual machines can be backed up. Using your enterprise backup solution, you can protect them with vSphere High Availability and Distributed Resource Scheduler to ensure they don't go down. You've got UPS battery backup power, perhaps generators. You've got redundant hot sites, let's say. There's so many benefits to keeping these virtual machines in the data center. And oh yeah, if an end user loses their laptop or iPad device, no company data was on that device because all that data is stored on the virtual machine in the data center. And then that virtual machine, using the personas feature of View 5, can be broken up into the 3 different sections you see there on the right. You've got the operating system, you've got the user data and personalization, and then you've got application virtualization, which we'll talk about in a second, is tied back to VMware's ThinApp. So let's say that you were running VMware View. This is what your desktop virtualization infrastructure would look like. On the left-hand side, you've got your thin client devices, desktops, local mode devices, and even mobile devices. Somehow they're getting into the data center. Could be through an IPsec VPN, it could be through VMware's security server, or they could be local devices. But either way, somehow they're getting to the VMware View Manager, and that's really the connection broker in all this. It's going to direct them to the pool of desktops or to their individual personal desktop that's running on the vSphere hypervisor across multiple servers in the data center. So that's where your centralized virtual desktops are, and you're going to use, as an administrator, the VMware View Manager, which is the administrative console, VMware View Composer, which is going to help you use the link clone feature to actually compose the end user virtual desktop images, and then VMware ThinApp to package the applications or to perform application virtualization for easier application management and deployment. So at this point, let me show you a demo of what VMware View looks like, both from the perspective of an administrator and from an end user's perspective. This is the VMware View administration web page. This is where an administrator would authorize end users to access desktops, create new virtual desktops, create virtual desktop pools, monitor the performance and usage of the VMware View virtual desktop infrastructure, and much more. So this is our dashboard here. So we can sort of see a red-green indication of our system health, the View components, the VMware vSphere components, and our Active Directory domain. Do we have connectivity to all these things? Are they up and running as they should be? We can see the status of our desktops over here. It looks like we've got an unassigned user disconnected desktop there in that folder. On the left-hand side, we can see information about, again, system health and events. And then this is where we navigate the VMware View configurations. So we can go into desktops right here, and we can see we've got one desktop. From here, we could reset that desktop. We could also assign users, send message, disconnect the sessions, and log off the session. We could also go into desktop pools. So desktop pools are pools of desktops for end users. Maybe where you don't have a one-to-one mapping of an end user to a particular desktop, a pool would be used just when you have a mass of users who need access to a mass of virtual desktops, and all those desktops can really be the same. So here we've got one pool that we've created, and if you go in and you entitle the pool, you actually entitle the pool to Active Directory groups or users. From our inventory here, we can also administer persistent disk and applications that have been virtualized using ThinApp. We would then assign those applications to virtual desktops. We can also monitor the virtual infrastructure here. We can configure policies, and we can view configuration settings, all through this VMware View administrative web portal. So that's what you would use as an administrator to administer your virtual desktop infrastructure. Now let me show you what it would look like if you were an end user and you were connecting to a virtual desktop out of the pool that we've created. So now let's say that I'm an end user and I'm going to connect to the virtual desktop pool that we've created. I'm going to use the VMware View client. I would use this client on a desktop or a laptop or even a thin client device. There's also a Mac client, and there's even iPad and Android device clients. So I'm here on my desktop, and I'm going to connect to the View connection server. That's our connection broker. I'll click Connect here, and then I'm going to log in as a user named Bob. From the View Administrative Portal, we've granted access for the username Bob to the pool we created, pool number 1. So I'm just going to click to connect to that pool. And there we go. I've connected to my Windows 7 desktop. I can minimize my web browsing session here. I can open up my Windows Explorer. I could go down to the Start menu and run my applications. And all this is running in the vSphere virtual infrastructure. I'm actually connecting to a virtual machine that makes up the pool that we created. So this is my virtual desktop. And from here, I can access all my company files and run all the company applications that are updated by the IT department. So that's what it looks like to be a VMware View end user and administrator. Now let's go back to our slides. ThinApp is an application virtualization tool from VMware. What it does is it packages applications once and then allows you to deploy those applications everywhere. It makes application upgrades easy. It makes application testing easy. It makes applications portable. So you could put, let's say, Microsoft Word or Excel on a USB key, take it wherever you go, stick in that USB key, and just run Word without any installation required. It works the same way for other applications that your end users use. By packaging these applications, including all the registry changes, you can prevent application conflicts and registry conflicts. For example, you could run multiple versions, let's say of Microsoft Word or some other enterprise application, all at the same time on the same computer without any problems, because they're all running in their own environment with their own virtual registry. You can even link from one virtualized application to another. For example, let's say that you're in a virtualized Adobe PDF reader, and in that PDF there's a website that you click on. There's a hyperlink. You click on that hyperlink, and it can actually start up a virtualized version of, let's say, Internet Explorer or Firefox or Chrome. So then that website or that hyperlink is brought up inside your virtualized web browser. So these virtualized applications can be linked together. So with ThinApp, the basic process is you install ThinApp on your local computer as an administrator. You bring it up. It takes a snapshot of what your computer looks like today. And by the way, you should really do this, or you should really package your applications for production on a clean installation. So it takes a snapshot of your existing computer. You then run the installation of the application you want to virtualize. It takes a post snapshot, basically capturing the changes, and then it's able to take those changes and then package them up, actually build an executable. You can then take that executable and run it anywhere on any Windows computer and run that application without any installation. It's super cool. So now let's move on and let's talk a little bit more about ThinApp. This is a slide from VMware.com, and on the left-hand side, similar to the VMware View slide, you've got the user experience. You've got your thin client, your desktop, your laptop. Let's say that you're using virtualization for your desktops or desktop virtualization. Now, you don't have to actually use desktop virtualization with ThinApp. You can use ThinApp on its own, even with regular physical PCs, for application virtualization. But it's a critical piece of VMware View, because ThinApp is what allows you to package your applications and separate them from the operating system as well as the user data. So in the middle, you've got your virtual desktop. It's got its persona, that's the user data and personalizations. You've got ThinApp, which is your virtualized applications, and then the virtualized operating system, or the VOS. So you've got those separated out into the three distinct pieces, which makes managing virtual desktops, end user data, and applications so much easier. Now let's take a minute, and I'd like to provide a demonstration of application virtualization using VMware's ThinApp. Here I am on a desktop that already has ThinApp installed. This is a brand new clean desktop, and what I want to demonstrate is how you can package the VNC application. For example, this is the installation file for VNC. If I double click this, notice how it's going to run me through the typical Windows installation wizard here, how I have to answer a series of questions and so on and so forth to perform the installation. In my case, I'm going to package the ThinApp client, or the ThinApp viewer as they call it, using the ThinApp setup capture. To do that, I'll go down here to Start, to All Programs, to VMware. Of course, I've already installed ThinApp, and all I have to do is click ThinApp Setup Capture. This opens up ThinApp, and this is basically the only interface you get for ThinApp. It's a relatively simple program. It basically packages the applications, and then once you build the application, you have this file that you can deploy or run from a USB key or whatever. In my case, let's say that I want to package the VNC viewer so that I don't have to go through the setup installation wizard every time. I could just put that packaged VNC viewer on a USB key. I could plug that USB key into any computer I go to and then run the VNC viewer that's been virtualized using ThinApp. So the basic process is to do a pre-scan of the base system. That's why you need a very clean installation of the lowest common denominator of any of the operating systems that you run. So if you still use Windows XP as well as Windows 7, you want Windows XP to be your base operating system. Then you'll install the application. You'll do a post-scan to identify changes to that base system pre-scan. You'll configure the project, then build the virtual application. It's super simple. So I'll just click Next here, and then we'll start the pre-scan. And this will take a few minutes, so I'll pause the video and be right back. Okay, with the pre-scan done, we can now install the application. So I'm going to go through the regular system installation here of VNC. I'll click Next. I'll accept the license agreement. I'll take the default location. I'm just going to install the viewer here, not the server. And I'm just going to call this My VNC to make sure I can identify it. We're not going to install any of the icons here. I'll click Next and Install. And Finish. And the installation is complete of VNC. If I go down here to All Programs, you can see there's My VNC, I called it. And now let's go ahead and do the post scan. Now we're comparing the pre-scan and the post-scan, and then we can see the differences here. So exactly which executable files do we want to create? Well, let's just create the VNC viewer only. So we'll just create the one executable because that's all I really need. I'll say Next here. We could integrate this with VMware Horizon Application Manager. That's a whole nother topic. I'll just say Next and we'll skip that for now. We've got a number of options here we can choose from. Basically, I'm just going to take all the defaults here. In our VMware View administration course, they go into a lot more detail on these options and how to deploy packages with ThinApp. But for the purposes of this introduction here, I'm just going to take all the defaults and say Save. So now let's open the project folder, and this is actually what was captured. And now we're to the point we can just click Build to build the application. We had the opportunity there to edit the package file if we chose to. Now it says the build is complete. I'll click Finish, and it opened up our VNC viewer application here. So now, let's say I just go in and I go to the control panel and I uninstall my VNC here. I'm going to uninstall the VNC viewer. Okay, it's removed from my computer. I'll go down here to Start, All Programs. Notice the My VNC folder is gone. So if we close this out, notice the new package I created here. I'm just going to move it to my desktop. It's a little 18 megabyte file. All I have to do is double click on this. Notice the ThinApp pop-up down here, and we're running the VNC viewer completely virtualized. This is application virtualization. I didn't have to do any installation. Now I can take this one file and I can copy this to a USB flash drive. I could deploy it to any computer. I could put it on a network share. We double click it. We see the pop-up down here. It's licensed to me, David Davis. It's a ThinApp package, and now we can use the VNC viewer, and it's been virtualized using application virtualization. So that's an example of how we can use ThinApp to package our applications and virtualize them, decoupling them from the operating system. And then we could use VMware View to assign these applications to end users or to virtual desktops. So with a successful demonstration of ThinApp, now let's go back to our slides. Here's another graphic from VMware that talks about how VMware ThinApp helps you to streamline the application lifecycle. In other words, let's say that you develop some in-house applications. You can use VMware ThinApp to take those applications, package them, test them, deliver them, and then allow end users to access the applications locally or over a network. And whether or not you develop your own applications, ThinApp is going to provide the exact same benefits to even third-party applications that you've purchased. Moving on, you might be wondering how much VMware View and desktop virtualization is going to cost you. Well, VMware has published a couple TCO or ROI calculators. These are the total cost of ownership or return on investment calculators that are going to help you to calculate essentially how much money using VMware's View or ThinApp will save you. So you can go to these URLs right here. I'm not going to go to them, but I wanted to make sure you had those in case you wanted to do a cost comparison and see that desktop virtualization really can save you money. So how do you evaluate VMware desktop virtualization for free? Well, if you Google VMware View product evaluation, you'll come to this web page here, and this is where you can sign up to get a 60-day evaluation of the VMware View package. And that's going to include VMware vSphere, VMware vCenter, VMware View, and VMware ThinApp. All those things will be downloaded with one free registration here. And during that 60-day period, you can test out desktop virtualization for yourself.